What is going on, everybody? How you doing? I am your humble guide, Stagtastic, coming back at you in Way of the Hunter. Let me start by saying a sincere thank you for all of my supporters, because without you, none of this is possible. I am thankful for each and every one of you and take none of you for granted. So thank you so much for being here. If you are new to the channel, consider subscribing and liking the video if you like what you see. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it means a whole lot to me. Today we're going to be talking about 4 additions or changes that I believe Way of the Hunter needs to introduce in the game sooner than later if it expects to continue to grow in popularity and increase its position in the hunter gaming world. In my hot take review of Aurora Shores, I had mentioned that as great as the new DLC was, there was always a sense that it could be that much better. There may be a myriad of reasons why the devs are not including certain elements in the game at this time, but I still believe that these 4 additions and changes could prove to be so much more beneficial than another DLC. In other words, without releasing a ton of new content, the developers could just capitalize on what is already in the game and make it 10 times better than it already is, and make it that much more attractive to others on the outside looking in. Now, these are not my only ideas for improvements. However, these are some of the easier things that I believe could be done in a relatively short amount of time. I will say that I will not be addressing any animals, since the addition of more animals will come in time with every new map release. Personally, if I had to say something, I cannot wait until turkeys are introduced to the game. What animals are you looking forward to being added in the game? Let me know in the comments. Now, it's clear that a lot of people like to compare Way of the Hunter to Call of the Wild, and I think both games cater to a specific type of hunter or specific type of person. Before becoming a content creator in Way of the Hunter, I did actually play Call of the Wild for a good period of time. I won't go into a whole lot of details with it, but ultimately, we don't just want another replica of Call of the Wild coming to Way of the Hunter. I believe that both games have their ups and downs, but to compare Way of the Hunter to Call of the Wild is, in my opinion, pretty unfair if you think about it, because Call of the Wild is 6 years old, whereas Way of the Hunter just came out last August. So for all of those of you who are saying this and that about Way of the Hunter and comparing it to Call of the Wild or any other game out there, just be patient. Way of the Hunter is just getting started. It's still by all accounts in the toddler stages of its growth, and in my opinion, the devs are actually doing a fairly decent job of listening to the communities and are trying very hard to differentiate themselves from Call of the Wild. For example, one small thing Way of the Hunter does differently is the fact that you don't have to buy ammo for your character, nor do you have to equip specific kinds of ammunition onto your character for your hunts. In Way of the Hunter, your character automatically has what he or she needs when you equip your weapon, which is, in my opinion, very nice and convenient. So these are 2 very different hunting games with very different styles of hunting. Again, in my humble opinion, Call of the Wild is more of an arcade, fast-paced hunting game, whereas Way of the Hunter is more strategic-based and slower-paced. So they're different for different users fundamentally, but that does not mean that Way of the Hunter cannot and should not bring elements of Call of the Wild to Way of the Hunter. I can guarantee you that if something is working in Way of the Hunter, then the devs in Call of the Wild are more than likely gonna try to add it to their game as well. So what I definitely don't want to see is the devs avoid adding something positive to Way of the Hunter just because Call of the Wild already has some similar features. I don't think that that's smart at all. After all, both games are hunting games, so why should anything really be off limits? Think about how amazing Way of the Hunter would be if it just had a few of the features Call of the Wild does. It seems like with the addition of the Aurora Shores DLC, things are actually looking pretty bright for Way of the Hunter. But are they as bright as they can be? Now, it does take time to build an empire and to rise up to meet the expectations of the crowd, and if the developers are not trying to win players over, then what are they doing with their time? There is a lot of work that needs to be done over the next several years for Way of the Hunter, but there are some small additions and changes that can happen sooner than later to make Way of the Hunter that much more attractive for hunters and gamers who are on the fence about getting the game, and at the same time make it more enjoyable for those who are already playing the game. With that said, here are those 4 additions or changes that Way of the Hunter needs to bring into the game sooner than later. Number 1, you need to increase the price of weapons and gear. In my opinion, the prices in the shop are far too low right now, and that creates a problem. One of the reasons people are not satisfied with what we have in game right now is because most of the people already have all the weapons and the gear unlocked. And so you create this sort of vacuum of people who are ready for the next big thing to come along. Now, the way to counter this problem is by increasing the prices of the goods in the shop. It's not a complete surprise that the developers decided to try to keep the cost of gear low in Way of the Hunter, as opposed to gear and weapons in Call of the Wild. If I had to draw a clear contrast, Call of the Wild tends to be more grindy for the gear, whereas Way of the Hunter is more grindy for the hunting and growing of your wildlife herds. And that is okay. But ultimately, I do not want to grind my butt off for 5 hours just to finally unlock a single weapon. But I also don't want to play for 5 hours and unlock every single weapon in the game. There has to be a balance, and I feel like Way of the Hunter could move up the scale, so to say. If you raise the prices in the shop, you are making obtaining new items more rewarding. Give players something to work towards. My personal suggestion to implement this change would be to do an across-the-board price increase for all the gear starting on a specific date to allow players to get in before that price does actually go up. But ultimately, you need to make obtaining new gear worthwhile and not just something that anyone could accomplish at any given time. It shouldn't be this easy to unlock all the weapons and gear for the entire game. One positive note, however, I did really like how the Apex crossbow had to be unlocked on the Aurora Shores map only after completing the campaign. This alone makes the crossbow a more unique weapon in the sense that not everyone can get it that easily, especially if you don't have the DLC. So I would personally like to see a lot more of this in the coming days for new weapons and gear. The second change that I would recommend is that Way of the Hunter needs to make characters customizable and interchangeable. For example, a lot of players have called for new clothing options like specific kinds of camouflage. Now, in a perfect world, the camouflage you wear would increase how stealthy your character is. But let's be honest, not even Call of the Wild has that feature. And ultimately, at the end of the day, people just like to have options as far as customizing their characters go. And this includes being able to change your character at any given time. If the developers don't want to go down the camouflage route, then maybe give us a special reason or a purpose behind picking a particular character. Maybe one character is more stealthy than another, or maybe one character is more accurate with the rifles, or something along those lines. And the only way to get that character is to do something crazy, some crazy achievement. But simple things like this to make the game even more personal to the hunter. The third thing we need in Way of the Hunter has to do with the binoculars and scopes. Now, this is a big one. Both need to be much stronger. With maps as large as they are in Way of the Hunter, and with as many beautiful open areas as there are, we need stronger binoculars. Period. There's no other way to say it. It doesn't make sense to go hunting with mismatching binoculars and scopes. As a hunter in real life, you want to have your binoculars match the scope that you're using as much as you can. If I'm doing some scouting in an area, I should not have to switch to my rifle scope just so that I can see at a further distance. This is a big no-no in the hunting world for obvious safety reasons. You never want to use your rifle scope as a better pair of binoculars. Now, for a game that emphasizes safe and humane hunting practices, this honestly seems like something that should be addressed. May I even be so bold as to recommend adding a spotting scope as a new piece of gear that you can bring in with you. And maybe if you have that spotting scope equipped, it takes up 2 slots in the gear category. If you just add a spotting scope to the game, I can already picture how fun multiplayer hunts will be when you're trying to take those long shots with your buddy. Ultimately, we need stronger scopes to see out to 1,000 yards and not just be able to zero our rifles in at 1,000 yards. My take on this is if the gear is available in real life, then I want to see it introduced in Way of the Hunter. It's that simple. In addition to stronger magnification, we need thermal or night vision scopes for night hunts. The carbine optic is a fantastic start, but it is not enough, especially since it has low magnification. With it being as cool as it is to hunt predators at night, we cannot see a thing, especially in thick foliage. And on top of that, the darkness only gets amplified if you're trying to use hunter sense while looking through a scope. So to correct this, we need night approved equipment. Lastly, as far as the binoculars goes, and this is a very simple fix, but it has been very annoying for me. Please, 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 please let us zoom in and out of magnification when using binoculars. Having a fixed magnification is very inconvenient, and many times I would rather just pull out my rifle scope instead of use my binoculars like I'm supposed to, just so that I can increase or decrease my magnification. Simple things like that to make the game better. The fourth addition to the game has to do with weapons. Now, I don't want to get caught up in specifics since everyone will want to see a specific weapon or caliber added to the game. But simply put, there are a large number of weapons that can be brought to Way of the Hunter. I would also personally like to see a variation of the same kind of weapons, but just chambered in different calibers. For example, I would personally like to see the over-under double-barrel shotgun, but chambered in 12 gauge. Now, like I said, I'm sure we all have specifics that we would want to see. If you have some of those, leave it in the comments and let me know. I'd love to see what you guys are thinking. With the addition of the crossbow, we can presume that the recurve bow and the compound bows are not far away. So this is very promising news for the arrival of new weapons later on. Personally, in the next DLC, I would love to see pistols be introduced as well as an AR style rifle, because I'm literally itching to go on some Texas style hog hunts in Transylvania. These are just 4 very basic, very easy things that can be done to make Way of the Hunter that much better without a huge new DLC map release. I have heard many people mention so many really great ideas, but those ideas are going to have to take time to come to fruition. I personally believe that tree stands will be a thing in Way of the Hunter in time, but I can only imagine what a headache that would be as a game developer to accomplish. We just need to be patient. These are just simple things that can be updated to the game that we already have. Now, I can understand on a small way why the gear and weapons have seemed so limited, and I believe that the thinking of the developers is that you want to focus on a few things early on and really master what you're doing, and then as you get better, add new things as they come along. And this is a really safe way to do business. But I also think that we are nearing the time, if not past the time, when you can bring in these 4 additions to the game without an enormous amount of changes. I think that Way of the Hunter is something very special, and I want it to continue to grow and improve. If the developers continue to listen to the community and to continue to bring solid additions and changes to the game, I think that in time, Way of the Hunter will become one of the biggest and best hunting games for many years to come. So increase the prices, make characters customizable, bring in better binoculars and scopes, and let's get some really good, fun weapons added in the next update. Do you agree with my suggestions? What things would you like to see included in the game in the near future? I'd love to hear what you're thinking, so make sure to leave a comment below. With that said, as always, I am your humble guide, Stagtastic. Thanks for watching. We hope to see you back here real soon. Happy hunting, and take care.